The small town of Fairview rarely produced artists. It raised teachers, mechanics, nurses, people who understood the sturdy rhythm of life. But Emma had always been different. Since she was a child, her world was built in brushstrokes and charcoal lines. While other kids played soccer or chased fireflies, Emma sat cross-legged on the porch, sketching faces she saw in the clouds. Now 32, with quiet eyes and calloused fingers, Emma had spent years selling hand-drawn postcards at the Sunday market. Few people stopped by her booth. Most admired her work with polite nods, then drifted toward the louder stalls selling jewelry or homemade jam. Still, Emma drew. She couldn't help it. It was the one thing that made her feel like herself. One evening, while folding away her sketches, Emma overheard a group of teenagers talking excitedly about a talent show happening in the city 2 towns over. "Big prizes," one boy said, "and if you're really good, you might get scouted." Emma's heart gave a nervous little lurch. She had never performed, never sought attention. But something about the idea, that maybe someone would see her, really see her, felt like oxygen after too long underwater. After a restless night, Emma filled out the application. 2 weeks later, she stood backstage at the Mid-State Talent Showcase, clutching her sketchpad so tightly her knuckles ached. The stage manager, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, gave her a once-over. "You're next," she said flatly, as if already disinterested. Emma stepped into the blinding light, her throat dry. The auditorium was massive, at least to her. Hundreds of faces melted into a blur beyond the first few rows. 3 judges sat behind a gleaming desk, their chairs towering, their buzzers glowing ominously red. The host announced her name, adding, "And Emma says her talent is drawing." The way he said it, half smirking, made the audience chuckle softly. Emma ignored the prickle in her cheeks and sat down at the easel set up center stage. She had only a few minutes, so she moved quickly, charcoal in hand, lines racing across the canvas with the urgency of a story desperate to be told. For a few heartbeats, there was silence. Her hand moved deftly, strong strokes outlining a face, delicate shadings capturing emotion. But not 30 seconds in, judge number 1, a woman in glittering heels, pressed her buzzer with a loud, dismissive bzzzt. The crowd tittered. Emma froze for a split second but kept drawing, determined. Judge number 2, a man with a fake tan and a shark smile, leaned into his mic, "We get that you can draw, sweetheart. This isn't an art gallery. It's a show. You gotta wow us." Another harsh bzzzt. Emma's chest tightened, but she kept going. The face was almost there, the sorrowful curve of the mouth, the hope hidden in the eyes. Judge number 3, who hadn't said a word, sighed heavily and slammed his buzzer without even looking up. The final buzzer echoed through the hall like a gunshot. The host walked back onto the stage with a theatrical wince. "Sorry, Emma. Maybe next time try something a little more exciting." Laughter, polite but cutting, rippled through the audience. Emma stood there for a moment, staring at her unfinished drawing, just a few more strokes, and it would have been beautiful. She felt like a balloon pricked by a pin, all the air rushing out of her. Shoulders hunched, she gathered her pad and charcoal, walking off stage as quickly and quietly as she could, her heart pounding in her ears. Behind the curtain, the stagehands barely glanced at her. Someone handed her a participant ribbon without meeting her eye. Emma slipped into the dark parking lot, the night air cool against the heat burning in her cheeks. She sat in her beat-up sedan, gripping the steering wheel, fighting the sting behind her eyes. For a long time, she just sat there. And then, with a kind of quiet, fierce resolve, Emma wiped her tears away, turned the key in the ignition, and whispered to herself. "They didn't even let me finish." She didn't know it yet, but her story was only beginning. The days after the Mid-State Talent Showcase felt like a heavy fog. Emma went through the motions, brewing her morning coffee, opening her small booth at the Sunday market, smiling politely at customers who didn't buy anything. But inside, something had cracked. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the way they hadn't even looked at her work. They hadn't seen her heart, her years of practice, her silent voice crying out on the canvas. One evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table, a blank sheet of paper before her. She should have been sketching, like she always did after dinner. But the pencil lay untouched beside her hand. Instead, she scrolled mindlessly through her phone, a pit growing in her stomach. And that's when she saw it. An ad for another talent show scheduled 2 weeks away, in the neighboring city of Brookfield. It wasn't as flashy as the one she'd failed at. The logo looked homemade, the prize money smaller. But the ad boasted something that made Emma's heart stir: we celebrate all kinds of talent. Every performer gets their full time on stage. Full time. No buzzers. No humiliating interruptions. Emma stared at the screen, her fingers hovering. She could hear the cruel laughter still ringing in her ears from the last time. She could see those judges' bored faces. But something stubborn inside her pushed back. Maybe not for the prize. Not for fame. Just to finish what she started. She signed up before she could talk herself out of it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Emma poured everything into her new piece. This time, she wasn't just sketching a beautiful face, she was telling a story. A story about hope, and heartbreak, and resilience. About herself. The day of the show arrived cloudy and cool, the gray sky matching the anxious churning in her chest. Brookfield Civic Center was smaller than the last venue, less intimidating somehow. Families milled about in the lobby, children buzzing with excitement. Backstage, Emma saw other performers, singers running scales, magicians flipping cards, a little boy practicing a clumsy tap dance. No one paid her much attention, and that suited her just fine. A kindly woman with a clipboard approached, giving Emma a warm smile. "You're Emma, right? You'll be after the acrobat duo. Just relax and enjoy yourself. You've got the full 5 minutes. Take your time." Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to show them who she was. When her turn came, Emma walked onto the smaller, friendlier stage. The lights weren't as harsh. She could actually see the first few rows of the audience, mothers holding babies, teenagers cheering for their friends, an old couple clasping hands. The judges, 3 of them, sat at a modest table to the side. They didn't have buzzers. No towering thrones. Just notebooks and kind eyes. Emma set up her easel, hands trembling slightly but growing steadier with each breath. She began to draw. At first, there was the familiar hum of polite interest. A few murmurs, some shifting in seats. But Emma didn't let it get to her. She focused only on the canvas, her hand moving with a surety born from years of unseen effort. Line by line, the image bloomed into existence. A girl, standing alone in a storm, battered but unbroken. Her hair whipped by the wind, her eyes fierce with quiet strength. In the background, faint outlines of people turning their backs, walking away, but the girl stood taller, her face lifted toward the light breaking through the clouds. Emma's hand raced the clock, heart pounding, shading and detailing, bringing the scene alive with every stroke. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about the judges. Or the audience. Or even the past humiliation. She was lost inside the art itself. When she laid down the final line and stepped back, she didn't even hear the applause at first. It washed over her like a wave, so warm and overwhelming it almost knocked the breath from her lungs. Emma blinked, startled. The audience was on its feet. The judges, too. One of them, a middle-aged man with a thick beard and watery eyes, leaned into his microphone and said, his voice thick with emotion, "Emma, that was breathtaking." The woman next to him, wiping tears from her cheeks, added, "You didn't just draw. You spoke. You told a story. And I think everyone here heard it loud and clear." The third judge, a young woman with bright pink hair, simply said, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us." Emma pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammering wildly. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about being seen. About standing in the light without flinching. As she left the stage, the applause still ringing in her ears, Emma caught sight of something that made her stop short. At the edge of the wings, a little girl stood watching her, wide-eyed and clutching a worn sketchpad to her chest. When their eyes met, the girl gave a shy, hopeful smile. And just like that, Emma realized, this was never about the judges. It was about the ones who understood. The quiet ones who needed to believe that their art, their voice, their soul mattered. Emma smiled back, feeling stronger than she had in years. Her story was far from over. The weeks after the Brookfield show blurred into a whirlwind Emma had never imagined. A clip of her drawing had gone viral. Someone in the audience had filmed it and posted it online with the caption, "When they don't let you finish, but you find the right stage." Overnight, Emma's quiet, invisible world exploded into color. Her inbox flooded with messages from strangers, aspiring artists, lonely teens, single mothers, wounded dreamers who all saw something of themselves in her storm-swept girl. Local news stations called, then regional ones. A national morning show requested an interview. Emma, who had once struggled to sell even a few postcards, now found herself the center of a growing movement, a celebration of perseverance, of unsilenced dreams. But it wasn't just fans and well-wishers who noticed. The organizers of the show that had humiliated her, reached out. A sleek woman named Vanessa, all sharp heels and glossy smiles, called Emma directly. "We'd love," she purred, "to invite you back. For a special feature segment. You're such an inspiration." Emma's stomach twisted at the sound of her voice. Inspiration. Now that it benefited them. She almost hung up. Almost. But a quiet, fierce part of her whispered, "No. Go back. On your terms." So she agreed. The day she returned to the same towering auditorium, Emma felt like two versions of herself were fighting inside her, the trembling woman who had once fled with tears burning her eyes, and the stronger woman who had stood tall before a sea of applause. Backstage, everything looked the same. The same blinding lights. The same smug judges. The same host, now shaking her hand with exaggerated enthusiasm for the cameras. Emma's hands didn't shake this time. Her easel was already set up center stage. Waiting. When they introduced her, the crowd buzzed with recognition. Whispers of, "That's her," floated to the ceiling. The host, grinning like a game show puppet, said into his mic, "Tonight, a very special guest returns to our stage, someone who taught us all a lesson about never giving up." Emma walked to the center, her movements calm, steady. She set down her sketchpad and lifted her charcoal. But this time, she didn't start with a generic face. She began sketching three figures seated behind a long table. The judges. The audience didn't realize it at first. She worked swiftly, precisely, the lines crisp and unmistakable. Within 2 minutes, there they were, Judge number 1, with her glittering heels and bored expression, Judge number 2, with his too white smile, Judge number 3, slumped disinterestedly, refusing to look. But Emma wasn't cruel. She didn't exaggerate their flaws. Instead, she portrayed them truthfully, and added something else. Above their heads, she drew a cloud of gray, heavy and oppressive, from which faint beams of light struggled to break through. The message was clear. Judgment, dismissiveness, cruelty, they dimmed the light, but could not extinguish it. The auditorium fell into a breathless, stunned silence. Emma finished the final line, stepped back, and simply stood there, allowing them to see themselves. For the first time all night, the judges looked uncomfortable. Truly uncomfortable. The host coughed awkwardly. Wow, that's something," he stammered. Emma walked to the microphone. Her voice was soft, but it carried to the farthest balcony. I came here once, hoping someone would see me, she said. But sometimes, the people you hope will notice, aren't the ones who matter. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. You can try to silence someone before they finish their story. But you can't erase what was meant to be seen. A beat of silence. Then, as if a dam had broken, the audience erupted, not polite applause, but a roar of standing ovation, stomping feet, clapping hands. Emma bowed her head slightly, her heart pounding not with fear this time, but with fierce, radiant pride. As she left the stage, a tear slid down Judge Number 1's heavily made-up cheek. Judge Number 2 avoided her gaze entirely. Judge Number 3, for the first time, looked up, really looked, and gave a slow, solemn nod. Emma didn't need their approval anymore. She had painted her truth. And they had no choice but to see it. Emma didn't look back as she walked off that grand stage. She didn't need to. The echo of the crowd's standing ovation filled every inch of her. It wrapped around her heart, mending old breaks she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. Outside the auditorium, the evening had slipped into a soft dusk. The city lights blinked awake like tiny stars on earth. Emma leaned against the cool brick wall for a moment, breathing it all in, the night air, the distant hum of traffic, the fierce, unbelievable peace blooming inside her chest. A few minutes later, the heavy doors burst open. People streamed out, chattering, laughing, some even wiping their eyes. A small group approached her hesitantly, a mother pushing a wheelchair, an elderly man carrying a battered art portfolio, a teenager with a nervous smile and rainbow hair. Emma, the teenager said, voice cracking slightly. You made me believe I could be seen too. The others nodded, offering shy smiles, outstretched hands, grateful hugs. One by one, they told her their stories, stories of being overlooked, dismissed, told they weren't enough. And in each face, Emma saw pieces of herself reflected back. She spent nearly an hour outside, listening, laughing, crying. No longer the invisible woman tucked behind a market booth. No longer the contestant buzzed off a stage. Now, she was something else entirely. Later, sitting alone on a bench beneath a flickering street lamp, Emma pulled out her sketch pad. Her hands, finally steady, danced across the paper. She didn't plan what to draw. She didn't have to. The image that appeared was simple. A figure standing in a storm, this time, not alone. This time, surrounded by others, each holding up a small, glowing lantern against the dark. Not erasing the storm, but lighting a path through it. She smiled to herself, tears blurring the lines on the page. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it for now. Opportunities would come. Offers. Interviews. Maybe even book deals or gallery showings. But tonight wasn't about any of that. Tonight was about finishing something she had started long ago, before the first rejection, before the first red buzzer. Before anyone knew her name. It was about choosing to keep drawing, even when no one was looking. It was about believing that her story mattered, even when others tried to silence it. As the night deepened around her, Emma closed her sketch pad with a satisfying thud and leaned back against the bench, gazing up at the stars scattered across the velvet sky. For the first time in her life, she wasn't wishing to be anywhere else or anyone else. She was exactly where she needed to be. And she knew, deep in her bones, there would always be more stories to tell. More storms to outlast. More light to share. They could press every red button in the world. It wouldn't stop her now.